Hi and welcome back to RC Modders, and this the fourth in the series looking at the Bruder excavator conversion to full RC. In the first couple of videos we looked at developing linear actuators made using lead screws from 3D printers and N20 gearbox motors to replace the cylinders, and in the last one installing independent track motors to drive the thing along. In this one I want to focus on creating some kind of mechanism for turning the body and ideally making it a 360-degree turn, which is going to come with additional challenges. Just before I go any further, I just want to thank everybody who's subscribed, thumbs up and commented my videos, and I particularly like the helpful suggestions which you're giving me, which is helping me turn my ambitions into a reality. If it's your first time on the channel, welcome, and don't forget to check out the many other RC videos which I've done over the time. At the moment I'm concentrating on Bruder, but I've made videos about all kinds of RC vehicles over the years. On with the build. So the first thing which I really thought about was what I was going to use for a main gear on the turret. I have seen another video where they've used a part from a helicopter. I wanted to use something that I knew would be readily available for people and hopefully make the sourcing of the parts easier. So what I came up with was using a Heng Long type main gear, and I was able to buy one of these which had already been converted to 360-degree travel, and by that what I mean is that somebody has helpfully filed out what would have originally been a tab here and put an extra cog in so that there's nothing stopping it turning all the way around. When the gearing first came, it actually had these parts here inside it, which I first of all cut out using a knife roughly. I'll just take this out and then use the Dremel to get the depth about the same all the way around. What I was aiming for was for this to be able to fit snugly over the top like so and turn such that the distance between this inner part and the inner part of the gear was about the same all the way around. I think I've approximately managed to achieve that. In order to drive this, and I've seen it done differently whereby the motor is actually mounted here underneath the cab, but the way around that I want to do it is I want to use a standard replacement Heng Long gearbox, so you can see the gear here, and I actually want to mount it on the chassis. Whatever you do is going to be a compromise of some sort, and in terms of which way round I want the tracks to be for driving forward, I'm going to want the end opposite the motors up here to actually be the one facing the front, and I'm thinking if I'm able to mount this gearbox on there, I don't think it's going to look too awful, and it's kind of in the same area where things aren't per the original Bruder model. So having done this and measured everything, what I've worked out is that for the two gears to mesh, it's going to need to be something like that, and that means that the distance between the bottom of this gear and the chassis needs to be 2 or 3 millimeters. Having measured this ring, which actually goes flush with the underneath of the ring on the cab, that actually means that this gear wheel needs to be up 2 or 3 millimeters from the bottom and effectively at the same height as the top of this moulding here. Having done my measuring, I think that this is going to work if I get rid of these fake nuts on here. And having measured the height of this, it's such a tight fit that I'm actually going to have to get rid of these little protrusions as well. So before I go any further, I'm just going to do that. I would always recommend using a brand new blade when starting something like this. The cuts are going to be cleaner and you're far less likely to slip off and hurt yourself. Now that only took about 5 minutes, but we're completely smooth all the way around on both of them, and in particular on this one here, if you find that there are any little lumps left, it's worth going back over with a knife. And the diameter of this piece here is very similar to the outer diameter of the ring there, but we're going to need to find a way of getting it on there absolutely straight. So if I'm able to put some glue around this piece here and actually install this part back on, I can probably offer it up and glue it, and that should be okay. But before I do that, there are one or two other things that I'd like to do. Mounting this motor is going to be much easier before this ring is stuck onto the other part, and it will be much easier to get to everything. So I'm actually going to install this first. So that's going to want to go about there, and roughly speaking I'm going to want this part here, which is the centre of the gear wheel, I'm going to want that to be in the middle of the chassis. Luckily there is already a hole over here, so I'm going to utilise that for mounting it to the body, and then I'm going to have to find a way of securing it at the other end. I'll do the first end first though. Take out the screw. It seems to be about 2.5–3 millimeters. Get it meshed onto the gear, roughly centered up, and I'm actually using the inside of the moulding here as a guide for that, and then just drill straight through. Then I'll be using a 35mm machine bolt to hold it in place. But just before I do, I need to figure a way of holding this end, and I've tried, but I can't drill a hole here or anywhere along there which isn't going to foul with the gears somehow. So we're going to need to mount a bracket underneath here and to screw in from this place here. So what I've done is I've taken a piece of scrap plastic, and the dimensions of it, particularly in terms of here, not more than 15mm this way, because otherwise it will interfere with the motor underneath, and I'm about 15mm the other way. Need to mark on here where the centre of this screw is, just to help me decide where the bracket goes, and I'll take this off for a minute. And so that is going to want to mount something like that, and because there's a little lip here, I'm using another scrap piece, and I think it's about 2mm deep, and I'm going to stick that on the top and make sure that it's flush so that the gearbox can sit flat. I'm going to glue all this together because I don't see much point in screwing it. That looks about the right place. Hold it there for a few seconds. Bit of activator. And that's looking good. Now, in order to make the other hole, we need to make sure that the mesh is right on the gear. Taking some complete scrap pieces of 2mm plastic card, I'm just placing them in various places around the gear travel, and I'll just drop that on there, like so, which is raising the gear a little bit up. And then I'll put this in. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to solder a couple of wires on here, I think. So I'll start by screwing this in. When I'm finished, I'll probably put a nut on the bottom, but I don't need to do that for now. And then a quick test with my 3.7 volt battery. That seems to be working alright. So I don't want the mesh too tight, but I don't want it loose either, so that's going to be about the right place. Take out the screw and make a hole. Another machine screw, this time I'm going to try a 15mm one. Screw it until it pulls down tight. That is rock solid, and a quick test to make sure that there's no unpleasant noises. And that all seems good. I did notice that it makes a slightly different note at one point in the travel. That might indicate that we're not quite central on here. I don't think it's enough to cause me any real bother. If I need to build some slack in, all that I'll do is I'll make this hole here slightly elongated and move it back slightly, but that's something that I could do at the very end. Now I think we need to turn our attention to the main body. One of the things which I discovered on another YouTube channel in their teardown video, and I'll try and post a link to that here, was that actually there's quite a neat trick for getting the boom out, and you just need a screwdriver. Lift up the tab, do it so the camera can see, lift up this tab and with a bit of luck it starts to slide out. You need to lift it even higher and it comes out all the way. At this moment in time I'm very glad that I put plugs on the end of the actuator wires so that it can just come all the way out. In the comment section of the second video somebody helpfully wrote in and suggested that I use one of these. It's called a slip ring, and what it does is it allows you to have wires on one side of a bearing with wires on the other side so that they can twist round and round, and I think that this can go at a few hundred revs per minute and the wires never twist up. This was the solution that I was looking for, so thank you very much Full Metal for that. Just so that you can see the specification of the one which I'm using, it's called an SRM 1206A, and this came from eBay I think. I'll post a link in the description below to where I got it from. I think I want to mount this in here, that way up, and I want to mount it centrally, probably actually on this tab here, and that's no doubt going to lead to some further trimming of the boom module, but I don't think that's going to be too difficult, so that this top part here will remain fixed and I'll be able to secure the wires in such a way as they don't foul, and then all of the movement will be underneath here, which will be inside the gear housing. So I need to start by making a hole this size, so I'll start by marking a hole in what I think is about the centre of this, and in the first place going through with a small drill bit. I'm then going to use an RC body reamer to get the hole to the size that I want. These do make nice holes. Let me just check the size of that hole. 12.41, that should be just right. Let's give it a quick test. That is a tight but perfect fit, and it looks as if I'm going to be able to screw that in, so I'll just make some quick holes. Just going through with a 2mm drill bit. And then just using some small self-tappers. That's looking good. In the original design for this, you've got these two parts here, and these stick out a bit, and they're designed to allow this body to lock in place on the turntable and not swivel easily from either the straight ahead or fully reversed position. We don't really want that feature here because when the motor stops it's going to stay in place anyway, so I'm actually going to grind these off carefully. That should be okay. The only way to know, and before going any further I do want to know, is to actually put this back on and see if it moves around smoothly. Let's just test that. Feels completely smooth. That's it. So the next thing for us to do is to loosen that off slightly and attach this to there. Now in order to get it dead central, because I don't think that I could easily do that by eye up here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this back on here, having put glue around the top, and then clip the thing back together again and then offer it up. Hope this works. This seems to be a hard enough plastic, so hopefully that'll be okay, and I'll be reinforcing it afterwards anyway. I don't think it does any harm to slightly roughen this up. Some sandpaper. This is quite fine sandpaper, but it's still going to do the job. that. And similarly, on here as well. I don't think I need this in place, so I'm going to take this out actually. I think everything's set for me to stick it on. Glue around the edge here, not a ridiculous amount, but hopefully enough. This will be reinforced afterwards, so it's really just to hold it in place. Wheel the right way up on here, and then put the two holes together. That's that. And then I need to push the gear wheel down all the way around, like so, making sure that it's pushed down. That is. I don't think activator will do any harm. Get some more in there. That seems to look okay all the way around, and it seems to turn quite freely as well. That was something which I was worried about, but that doesn't seem to be a problem. I'm just going to leave that now for a few minutes to settle a bit better. Actually, I'll leave it upside down. Like so. A couple of minutes has passed, and I'm going to very carefully ease it back off again. It's actually harder to get off because it's being held in place by this ring, but it did come off and nothing moved. This is likely to be a real weak point on the model unless I do something to reinforce it. For the reinforcement, I'm going to use these servo retaining screws, and I'm going to first of all drill out with a 1.5mm drill bit. This is quite brittle plastic. You need to be quite careful because it could crack, and also you need to be further in than this piece here, otherwise it's going to fail on the chassis and the turn won't be smooth. Those are all held in. I was going to go around with epoxy, but I don't think that that's going to be necessary. I might still do that, but I think that that's okay for now. Put this back in, remount the base, and because of where this screw is, I think we're going to be fine with that. Let's try this. Pushing really straight. Just checking for clear movement, and that seems to be alright. And then with it round this way, pushing that on. Getting that nice and tight. Just push this wire out of the way for a minute. And then let's give it its first quick test. I'm going to use a 7.2 volt battery. And bear in mind that when it's being used, it will be on a variable speed controller. And from the other side, just so that you can see what it would look like when it's going along. And you can hopefully see here that this piece here is just missing the gearbox. In fact, it's so thin, the hole, the only thing I can fit in there is a very thin piece of sandpaper. Just as well I cut off those little bits that were sticking out. I thought it would probably virtually miss, but those would have stuck into it by quite a bit. So this whole thing has been quite millimetre perfect really. Right, that's all looking good. So I'm going to tidy the wires up a little bit off camera, put the boom back on, wire up the track motors to the slip ring and give it a test. One thing not to leave till the end is the placement of the battery. I'm quite keen to be able to put in a full-sized nickel metal hydride battery. This one here's got a hump pack, but lengthwise we're still fine. So dropping that into here, I can see where it will fit. The battery wants to really go as far back as possible to counterbalance the weight of the digging arm, and I'm going to put 2 pieces of plastic. These are actually offcuts from when I took that mechanism out of the arm, so I'll just glue these in. Put a decent amount on because there's nothing more annoying than when things like this come off when you're running the model. So just get one in. I want it to be a reasonable fit, not a tight fit, just to stop it sliding around too much. Give those a couple of minutes to dry. Now I'm quite keen for this wire here not to get caught up or cause many problems, so I'm going to want to place that. So I put some heat shrink over this part here, and then using this wire clip, which actually was for a radio control lighting set, I'll just push it slightly down. I'm going to want that at the back quite close to the battery holder. Get it to the place so that the wire's going to go about straight, just about there. And then having got the wire to go in what is pretty well a straight line, just going to close the jaws on the clamp. That's it, that should keep that in place. If I'm going to want to be able to put this bit back, I'm going to have to make a slice here, I think, for that wire to go through, and also it's going to need to accommodate this whole plastic piece here with the wire sticking out of the top, and I think the same is going to be said of this bit here. So I'm just going to carve a little bit out of these two. Right, let's give that a go. That should hopefully be enough. Let's try that. This is obviously going to get harder when I've got another 3 more wires coming out of here for the other cylinders. That's it, and it's in. Right, now it's just going to be a case of linking these 6 wires up to these 6 wires on the bottom. I don't want there to be any danger of these wires ever catching, especially on these tabs here, because it's going to be moving around. So I'm actually going to start by putting a tie wrap around here. And I want the wires to be inside, so it'll be like that. And I'm actually going to pull it quite tight so that that stays there, so that when it's moving around, these wires will stay in place. I might even put an extra cable tie here so that they don't get tempted to be separated. That's that. That should be okay. Well, we'll soon find out anyway. The next thing is going to be to find a neat way of getting the wires from the motor and the gearbox motor through into the chassis. I have this one very long drill bit and I'm going to use that. And then I think that the gearbox can probably share one of the holes. and then a small piece of black insulation tape here just to keep the wire out of the way and to disguise it a little bit. Well, that's all the wires done underneath, so that ought to prevent the wires from snagging on anything. I'll just fold these around the back to make it even safer. Given that I'm going to end up with 4 speed controllers and they all have these JST plugs on them, so there'll be the saber tooth and then there'll be the 3 little speed controllers for each of the cylinders, I've made up this small board which has got a Dean's plug and then 4 JST plugs here. The long one here will be for the saber tooth and the other 3 will be for the cylinder ones. Obviously I need to be careful that nothing can short across here, so I'll probably put some tape over it, or I might even epoxy it later. Well, I guess I can't put it off any longer. It's time for its first road test. Black tape put on the bottom of this bit here so that there's no danger of shorting. Right, no smoke anywhere, that's always a good sign. If you wire any of these speed controllers up the wrong way, they will instantly burn out, so that's good. Let's just see that it's turning. That's looking good. And the tracks. Good. Okay, let's see how it goes. In conclusion, I think that works pretty well. The last things to do in the excavator are going to be the other cylinders, and I'm still waiting for the other 2 speed controllers to turn up, so I may actually make a video on something else in between. I'm absolutely dying to get going on the truck and the low loader, and hopefully finding a way of one to control the other. As ever, keep those subscriptions, likes and comments going, especially the comments, and until the next time, thank you very much for watching.